kids, welcome to Stylus Rumble Chat Time thing. Today I'm talking to 3 super professional riggers from the real world of animation. Between us we've got almost 40 years of experience, so pretty fun to have a good chat about rigging and a little bit on the new stuff and a little bit on the old stuff. I went through and edited the audio best I could because we were doing a Google Hangout, so everybody's audio was just a little bit off leveling wise and stuff. So hopefully that's not too bad. The video quality is also a little bit touchy, and Rachel didn't have a camera. So what I'm going to do is just shrink this down the corner, and I'm going to have some background painting design that I did from my film, so you can see some of the thumbnailing I'm done. If you guys want to keep your eyes busy, when I listen to this kind of thing, I'm just doing my own thing, so feel free to ignore the visuals. The only real editing I've done, aside from a little bit of audio tweaking and taking out any pauses, is I've moved the front half of the interview. I say interview loosely because I don't really get into many questions, but I moved that to the back, and then I moved the Q&A part to the front. So there might be like a weird cut in the middle where we're gonna say like, oh, so our closing statements are, and then I included all the other stuff because it's going to be really helpful for people who know the program a little better, because it gets a little bit technical. So I feel like that's a little bit niche to leave at the beginning because a lot of people aren't even going to understand what we're talking about. But the first half definitely has some amazing advice for baby animators and baby riggers and designers too, talking about how the different things interact and stuff. But you can just watch it and you'll hear all about it there. We even talk about bees. Everybody likes bees. Thanks for dropping by, kids. I'll do an intro before this, and then edit out me talking about the intro before this. So I guess we'll just start with the elevator pitch of who you guys each are, what you do, and how you got to where you are now. Who are you guys? And gals. Mostly gals. All gals.
Hi, Angeline. I started working in Harmony at Guru, and I was a rigger there. And Rachel, who's also on the call there, she's the one who hired me and taught me Harmony. And now I'm at another studio, and I was doing effects, and now I was doing rigging then, and now I'm kind of rigging effects because we're just assembling libraries.
Nice. Yeah, once you get into the generalist umbrella, it's kind of hard to say what you do.
Yeah.
And what show you work on. Doing several things. So now if I know my alphabet song, we'll move on to Mel.
Hi, I'm Mel, and I was originally an animator. I learned Harmony at Mercury, actually, a very long time ago. And then when I moved to Guru, I was on the rigging team briefly with Rachel.
Hello.
And until I went back to animation and became a lead animator and animation supervisor for quite a while. But I kept rigging just to improve the show and to help the rigging team, and it was a whole process. And then I've now just recently moved to Yowza, where I was supposed to be. Yeah. Where I was supposed to be animation supervisor, but they didn't have a rigging team, so I took over the rigging department, and now I'm the rigging supervisor there.
I'm just gonna fix this here, this mess.
What?
You're like, I'm just gonna fix this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After I designed one of the rigs, they're basically like, "Do you just want to stay as rigging supervisor?"
I've had that happen where you accidentally fix something, and then they're like, "Oh, can you just rig every character on the show? That'd be great."
So, but that's fine because padding. It's good to have it on your resume, officially. So, good.
I guess that leaves me.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Ray Dickey. I've been working in animation as long as Tracy has. I went to school with Tracy.
Yeah.
We learned how to use Harmony way back when it was Solo and Harmony, and then
it was Digital Pro.
And they taught us to rig with glue, and that's just a sad time.
I love glue.
We didn't even know that there was multiple layers. We didn't even know that there was you could make your composites not flatten everything. Mm-hmm. That was a life-changing revelation when we figured that out. So I've been rigging supervisor on several shows at a couple different studios. I was the rigging supervisor on Ever After High at Guru for almost 4 years, and now I'm the studio-wide rigging supervisor at the Toronto Brown Bag Films, which used to be Nine Story.
Super rigger extraordinaire.
Yeah, just on all the shows. They're like, hey, do you want to be on all the shows? I'm like, well, that's what you hired me for, so okay.
That so suits you. You just run around like flaily Kermit. Just like, what is
That's
happening?
pretty much it. Like,
All these shows are broken!
It's like mostly just meetings. That's my day now.
No, meetings are the worst. Okay, so if someone wanted to become a baby rigger, what would you guys suggest? Like, how do you get into rigging as a beginning? Because I know, Ray, you've had to hire baby riggers before. What do you look for in a baby rigger portfolio?
I look for somebody who looks at what they're doing and actually thinks about how it's going to be used. If I get a rig back from someone where it's really obvious to me that they didn't even try to test the rig and like everything's plugged in like 17 times, or like an arm is entirely attached to a hand. I got a rig back last week for a test where they decided because I grouped the sleeve to the arm to the hand for ease of grabbing when you're putting it into a rig, that meant I wanted the sleeve, the arm, and the hand as one element with a deformer on it.
Wow.
So don't do that! Drawing substitutions need to happen.
My favorite rig I ever got was when we were working at By the Rapids. And they...
I know this story.
Yeah. They hired... We were just so swamped we couldn't keep up with it. So they got a freelancer to do a rig, and they sent it back to me. It was a little cat. So I reset the animation on the cat, because it was single views at the time, so we weren't putting any animation on the rigs. And I reset it, and the cat's head, like, the ears flew off, and it flipped upside down, and, like, pieces of the arms just exploded across the screen, and I was just like...
Yeah, your rig should always reset at 3/4 front. I thought you were going to tell the story about the uncle where his head just stopped at his hat.
Oh,
Do
no.
you remember that?
That's true. Who rigged that one? I don't remember.
Jesse rigged that.
Yeah, he had a hat, and when you took it off, it was just nothing.
I've definitely worked with someone.
But I'd rather have someone put nothing under a hat, if that's the character's MO, like he's never taking it off, than someone who puts the complete skin body underneath the shirt.
Yeah, you don't need that.
Like it's like there's a complete naked human underneath their clothes.
Also good.
That's worse to me.
I think a thing that I'm always looking for if someone is going to help rig or help like feed me things to rig, they have to think about what's happening behind. Like the example with the hat, I've definitely got art back where you're looking at it, and if you had to remove the hat was actually, it was like a piece that had been carefully cut out to fit around somebody's like eyebrows and stuff. So if the animator had have gone like this, it wouldn't have fit anymore. Like it would have been cutting into
It's a
their
load-bearing
head.
hat.
And I was like, well, it looks good still, but you have to think like if you're drawing the far arm and it's behind the body and you only see like the finger and the thumb and not these three fingers, the animator's going to move the arm out because this is for animation. You have to give me, or like the rigger has to then give the animator the entire hand, the entire arm. If it's a profile, I need the far arm. I know you can't see it in the design, but the animator needs it. Like, it's just, these are things that get missed.
Working with
that's
a
the
solid
primary-
designer is amazing.
That's the primary point of rigging, though. Like rigging is one of those departments that is totally for another department. Unlike backgrounds or layouts or designs where, you know, the person can put it on their Tumblr and be like, look at this beautiful background as an isolated thing. No one is going to just look at a rig and be like, look at that rig. What is the first thing you're going to do when you look at that rig? You're going to ask the question, does it animate well? Because that is the point of a rig. A rig is to be able to be animated. And so it has to have all that thing. So riggers, any riggers, have to not think of themselves as like, I just need to put some stuff to make this move. They have to think more forward. They have to think, if I was animating this, like if I rigged something would I find this a help or hindrance if I then animated with it? When I'm looking for riggers, I'm actually more interested in a person with an animation background who would like to try their hand at rigging or want to be a rigger than someone that's never animated in their life and wants to be a rigger, because they can't really think about that kind of stuff. Like, you have to be able to say it's not just I need to rig this for this view. It's a long-term, more far-sighted view of, am I rigging this appropriately for what it needs to do? Good riggers are those riggers that don't just take the character and rig the standard. They're the ones that would come up to me and say, hey, do you actually have a posing sheet so I can see what the character's going to be doing so that I can rig it appropriately for what they're going to be doing in the show? That is the thing that really impresses me. Not these people that are just like, I don't know, and they just slap a bunch of stuff together because it kind of works when you just rotate it a little bit. That's not a good rigger. A rigger is someone that actually thinks, is this going to be good for what the purpose of the actual thing is, which is animation? And it's a very fine line that you have to balance of, again, all the bells and whistles with keeping
That's
it
what
light.
I was going to say.
Yeah. That's just experience of being able to look at the show and go, well, okay, and talking to the animation director. Like, it's very important that this is a department that has to continuously talk to the animation department of what not only animation needs, but also tell them, like, well, these are the things that this rig can do, can't do, and make a good departments that work well together that will actually have a show that works are both people coming and not just saying, well, this is what I want and you have to do it, or like, I can't do this, but finding like a good common ground to make the best rig for that show. You know what I'm saying?
I think it's also really important to remember that the rigs that you're doing will work for probably like 75% of the scenes.
Yeah.
And then if you're needing something special, it's either going to be like a special pose, or the animator will actually need to go in and like adjust the rig. So it's good for animators to have watched Tracy's videos. I keep pushing them.
Yeah. But even the best rig will only work most of the time. It will never work 100% of the time.
Yeah, and
so,
we can't rig for that.
No, you can't.
So people still have to realize that they're going to have to redraw. They are going to have to do whatever. And actually, it's not even just really good riggers are people that know animation. The best animators in Harmony are actually people that know at least basic or intermediate rigging, because they know that the rig is there for most of it, but if they need to do anything with the scene, they have the ability to change it at their whim to be able for it to work for the scene. So it's really, it's really one of those things where I would say, like, the best, both animators and riggers are good at both things. Because an animator who knows how to rig will make their lives a million times easier when they're in a production, and a rigger who knows how to animate will be valued a million times higher than any animation department, because they're thinking and being considerate to animation than a person who doesn't and just like rigs because that's what they think.
Yeah, I think getting over the fear of the network is such a huge deal for people working in production, because the bare minimum that an animator should be able to do is take a prop and put it in the hand and connect it to the hand. Because I've been doing some animation revisions from time to time, and the hand is just floating around and it's not connected and stuff. And I'm like, you're hurting yourself and others right now. Like, this is the bare minimum, is just being able to hook one thing up to follow another thing.
Yeah.
The node view.
It's node view.
Node view.
Node view.
The network. The node view is a type of visual language that everyone should learn, at least, even if you don't know how to rig perfectly yourself. Animators, everyone should be able to open up the node view, look at a rig, and at least go, I understand generally what is happening here. I understand that, this is being parented to this is being masked by this. And because, if you're illiterate to that language, which is very important, you're going to suffer in using the program. And this is the other thing, riggers. I've gotten a couple of tests from, again, riggers who decided not to use my template, and
Oh, yes.
that I've
Always
given
use
them.
the template if
Yeah.
you get one.
And they've tried to rig
It's
it
supposed to
themselves,
save you
like set it up themselves, but they haven't gone into their preferences. Like they don't even know the program that well. Like they don't know that they need to turn off animate using animation tools, and they don't know that
Do that first.
yeah, they don't know that they need to put their bitmaps to pass through, and they don't even really know like the the program themselves. And I think out of all the departments, rigging should know the program that they're working in the best. So that's the other thing that I look in a rigger, like, did you actually use the program? And you can teach
But you
people
can
that,
teach.
right? You
Like,
can
you
teach
can
people that,
learn.
but you can get a sense. Usually you can really zero in on the people that are more technologically adept than others, and and I'm not gonna lie, like that is an asset to have if you're technically adept, like if you can actually pick up on the more technical side of things.
Yeah, I think that 2D rigging is really a logic problem. It's a visual
Yeah.
logic
Yes.
puzzle,
Yeah.
is the way I think of
Yeah.
it. And if you're not someone who enjoys puzzles, you probably are going to have a lot more fun in another department. You're not going to excel at it because you don't like it. Like, all goes hand in hand.
You have to like always solving problems, and you have to like not turning your brain off. Like rigging is one of those things where you can't just go into autopilot. You're always making sure, are these things set properly? Is this going to work in these instances?
Yeah.
Are my
have I
labels
rigged?
clear?
Is this
Did I
working
name
in
everything?
did you name everything properly? Did you set your pivot points? Is this working
And then
in the
check
render view over
Always check your renders.
just the GL? Because again, Harmony still hasn't fixed their anti-aliasing problems sometimes. Well, at least in the version that we're working in, which is 14.1.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's 14.1.
So we're still, for instance, getting problems like if you use an auto patch with a cutter, you're getting that anti-aliasing line.
Auto patches aren't masks.
Sorry, Ray Ray.
No, they're not. Use the color art.
I'm
Put the
sorry.
line on top.
And anyway, there are some
Sorry,
times
Mel.
that you'll need to use it. I understand that. There's sometimes, or you're not even cutting it. You're sometimes, or sometimes you're not even using it. You're doing other things, but you see that anti-aliasing line,
Yeah,
and
sometimes it just shows up.
you'll
Yeah.
miss in the OpenGL view. But if you don't check the render, that's you'll miss it completely. And sometimes you'll go into production with that, and suddenly you'll have the art director going like, "Why the hell is that line
Zooming
happening
in.
there?" And
Yeah.
instead of fixing it once, you're now going into 300 scenes to fix it. So you always have to have your brain working.
One thing I wanted to add on to
rigging.
what you were saying before with rigging needing to work tightly with animation, depending on the show, it's probably also going to have a good relationship with design as well, because sometimes designers draw these beautiful pictures and you look at it and you're like,
That's not gonna rig.
that is, I can rig it and the animators can work with it, but you just added a week of time for like this one stupid thing. Have you shown the client yet? Can we talk before you've shown this to the client? And they fall in love with this detail that has now added so much complexity to everything. Again, it depends on the relationship you have with the client and if the client's open to change, because things will make things expensive. Some are, some aren't. But if you can talk to design and say, guys, no tassels. We don't want
No tassels.
we don't want like hoodies with or like capes with tassels on them. Like effects is not drawing that. They quit. They're not
No
doing it
texture
anymore.
on joints.
No,
Oh,
don't put textures on just. Like, that's actually a really good point. Like, design and rigging, not just rigging, but like design too, we're all working towards giving animation something they can
Yeah.
use. And rigging can rig it until we're blue in the face, until it chugs everything for just one view. But at the end of the day, if the design is not at all animation friendly, we are wasting a huge amount of time in rigging, in animation for something that could have been fixed in design. And usually design is like a 4 or 5 person department, rigging is like a 3-person department, maybe 4 depending on the show, and then animation is a 30-person department. So it's way less expensive for us to fix something in design than to let it get to animation and have all the animators struggle. And it's not even just a monetary issue, it's also a morale issue. If the animators feel like design and rigging hates them, they don't want to work on the show. They don't want to put in the extra like hour once or twice a week, or 4 hours if the design is really bad or really heavy. They just want to go home.
Yeah.
Like, they're like, if you don't care, I don't care, and I'm going home, man.
Yeah, so it's really important to have all three departments working together. And it's actually very good. Like, if I ever started a studio and had millions and gajillions of dollars, I would actually make every department spend at least a couple months animating something, just so they know how hard it is to animate something under a deadline too, so that they have, because it's not their fault. Like, if someone just wants to be a designer and has never animated, they don't think about those kind of things, because it doesn't even enter their wheel that a texture on a joint would be problematic, because they're only used to static images. Like, they're not really thinking about how they move or how they bend at all, right?
I'd like to tell you a story. We were working overtime to get stuff done. It was 7 days a week for like a month, I think, at this point. I was in there on a weekend. I opened up a character, and there was a gradient, because that was the show. There's just gradients. But this gradient went from the toes to the top of the head, and I looked at it, and I flipped my table, and I flipped the tables on either side, and then I went to Rachel.
It was terrifying. I was
and
there.
She flipped her table,
and then
I took the gradient off.
Tables.
And no one knows.
Did I take it off?
Oh, I took it
I think we just
off.
Yeah.
I was no.
It was a background character too. It was like just like this tiny little background character where it just had a gradient from the toes to the top of his head. And we're like, we told you so many times not to do this, please.
There was no time to go back to them, so like,
yeah.
That's the other thing with rigging, is people seem to not realize how much designing is actually done in rigging, because sometimes you get things you're like, nope, and then you just kind of scoot stuff over.
Yeah.
That's okay. Like, I've been working on a show where you can't do that. So that's becoming a problem, where the client is extremely precious about the main character's designs, and if things need to be changed for rigging, it's already too late, because the client's completely in love with the original designs. And if you slightly change things, even by like 1 pixel, I had a talking to for that. Yeah, we've got it sorted out now, but it's like some clients are very, very, very particular about their designs, and they will flip tables on you if you ever so slightly change them to make them look pretty in animation.
This is when it's really good to have the design lead and the rigging lead and the animation lead get together before the designs are actually sent to the clients. So like, they can flag things and be like, okay, like, this and this and this, can we try something else like this, because it's not going to work for these reasons. And then before the client even has a chance to fall in love with something, it'll be more animation friendly. Because sometimes, like, I love that clients have the money, but sometimes they don't have the knowledge of like how things actually work in a production setting.
Or if they do, their knowledge is outdated.
Yeah,
like some of those designs that we were getting from the director, where it would have been fine in an 80s cartoon, but as soon as you translate that into a cutout situation, it becomes a problem for everybody. Like, where it's designed to be hand-drawn, but we don't have the time or the budget for that.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
Yeah, I think all departments have that sort of relationship of, like, whenever you start a new job, you have to kind of read the room and see what kind of, even just your supervisor versus your client or whatever, has a level of changeability. Like, even in animation, you'll get a storyboard, and either that's it, you need to animate this, or you have a lot of artistic license where you can kind of stretch it here, kind of push the timing around a little bit. Like, there's I think every department and every level of approval has that. You got to kind of see where they are, how lukewarm the water is.
And every production's different, like every style is going to need different rigging, different style of animation. It's always going to be a different beast. Like, as a rigger, you're going to have to know that every production you land in you're going to have to do something different. Like you're going to have to change the rig to be able to suit that production. Like you're not going to just be able to go like, I have perfected the entire envelope deformer character, and this is the greatest thing in the world. Because I came from Nelvana, and and then you go to another production where you're just like, actually, no, for this production, I'm gonna have to do.
Yeah, we work
I'm
on
gonna have to
stock
do
dells
something
that fell off a truck, so you're gonna have to lighten this up.
Yeah.
That's the other thing with animation. The computers are often like not the strongest.
Yeah.
So
they're getting slightly better, but you can also hit the complexity echelon with Harmony too. With like the envelope deformers, like a lot of animators are really in love with having envelope deformers on everything, especially the Nelvana animators.
I never understood that though. Like as an animator, like first before a rigger, I find that envelope deformers are more like everything is good in whatever situation you have it in. But if you have an envelope deformer over every single thing, like it's more of a hindrance than it is a help. Like you could easily just quickly redraw something sometimes than it is to actually pose it like it move. Yeah, and envelope deformers.
You also can't
break lines, and there's still problems with line quality and things like that. So
you can't put a texture on them; they break.
Yeah, they have to be like solid color. And sometimes like I've heard stories of animators spending like literally an 8-hour day doing one pose, and that is crazy nuts. If you have to do 20, 30, 40, 50 seconds a week, depending on what show you're on, you can't spend an entire day on one pose because you're tweaking envelope deformers all day to get it into the precise position. That's
ridiculous.
Crazy.
The math don't add up there.
No.
Somebody needs to sleep at some
Unless
point.
it's one held frame for a long time.
Well, even so, like,
and that doesn't mean that it's still going to animate well either. Like deformers, sometimes like when you actually tween a deformer, like sometimes it's fine, but sometimes it kind of does a weird thing. So
especially with envelope deformers where they're working in translation rather than rotation.
Yeah, exactly. So you're still not helping yourself in the long run because you're still tweaking every single frame, of that envelope deformer to make it like animate well. So it's not. Yeah, I don't understand why people are in love with envelope deformers as much as they are.
Yeah,
because they haven't had the slightly good version of it, which is the thing that we have to do.
And again, like the rigs that we're using that I've designed for this production, like some of them do have envelope deformers. Like I'm not totally set against it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the fact that some studios are like everything envelope deformers.
Like every single line,
every single thing.
And then you have this really beautiful 360-degree rotation that's impossible to animate.
Yeah,
it's just too
and your story about how you put just a normal deformer in the torso, obviously probably with a kinematic output so that the arms and the head and the neck are like moving along. You can't do that with an envelope deformer.
Well, you could stick a kinematic to each curve, but then it's just really clunky. And then you get port issues on
that's
you get
not
too many
great.
ports and then Harmony cries.
I can't even.
Like, oh no, I don't know which port. Oh, did they fix the thing in Harmony 15 where the ports on the top side of groups were different from the bottom side and like everything else in the program?
I have no idea.
Where they randomly decided that port 0 was on the opposite side.
Oh, is it?
Of port 0 on everything else.
I did not know.
Program, and you can't alt drag groups anymore. That might have just been the beta version that I was looking at, but yeah, I know you don't use groups very much because you hate them with a burning passion.
Well, I like to see everything. But then you gotta nitpick through stuff if you gotta change anything. I don't want to go through 50 groups to find everything, and then when you got to connect something, you got to drag it to the multi-port out. You got to drag it to the multi-port out. You got to drag it to the multi-port out, and you're just like, oh, when does it?
But then you have to like scroll 7 ever to get from like
Yeah.
the head of your character.
Tracy, I think you're like, it's 3 against 1 in this issue. Like, everyone here, I think, likes
Because-
groups except
I mean,
you.
I'm not allowed to use groups where I'm at right now because they don't like them. but
Good.
it's like, it drives me so
You
crazy.
take your Matryoshka rigs and you get out of here.
But it's,
I like my
but it's,
Matryoshka
again,
rigs, thank you.
It's so
but you have
scary
to
for
think
the
sometimes.
animators who open up these things
That's
and then
right.
rig that's this. Wait. It's like
You need to zoom out. You need to zoom out. Yeah.
That's
as far
very,
as I
like,
can
those
zoom.
rigs are very intimidating, and like
Yeah, I'll
groups,
group
groups
things.
for
I'll group busy stuff. Like if a lot of our characters have big skirts with 500 things, I'll group the skirt. But I don't like grouping the major, like all the different limbs, like having a left limb and then a right limb, and then inside there's a left hand inside the left limb, and then in there, like nesting can
you
get
don't
a
have to do
little
that.
bit
You
much.
don't have to do
Not
nesting
Patterns
groups.
on that.
Yeah,
No.
I want both my limbs next to each other. So if I gotta click both, so I want to raise them, I could just go click click. They're right next to each other, and they're in a mat. So you just here are the limbs, here are the face. I want the 2 eyes close enough that I could just go click click, and I can take both the eyes and then move them around. I just like things
That's
close together and
typically-
clickable in sensible locations.
I'm usually working in the camera view for something like that where I'm grabbing the stuff
Yeah.
there.
But if an eye has like
We're
15
also used to working
pieces,
with the point constraints, though, where like up until we all went to other places from Guru, we were working with the what are they called now? They're pointers for us, but what's the new name for them? The 2-point constraint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
15.
2 points.
We're used to working with that, where it doesn't break. Like you can actually attach your shoulder line to the arm and then have that all go together when you just click on the upper arm if you're going to drag that around. Because you can use pointers to like glue everything together in a way that's not heavy.
But not using glue. That was
No,
just
don't use glue.
figured-
Glue is bad. Don't use glue. No glue.
Don't be clear.
Bye.
yeah, I think it all falls under the umbrella of you're never going to impress. Like, no, you're never going to come up with a rig that satisfies every person and every need. It's just not
Yeah.
possible. So you have to,
Yeah.
if you're in the rigging department, you have to be ready to have people constantly complain.
Oh yeah.
Just no matter what
Yeah.
you do. So if you are rigging and people are constantly complaining, that's normal.
You're doing it right.
Yeah, like you're probably not as bad as they make you feel.
No, you're not.
And if your production does insist on not having groups, backdrops are a really nice way to organize things.
That's
I
what
think-
I do is backdrops.
They work okay.
Yeah.
And like I said, I
And
will
then
use a
we-
group for busy stuff. If the hair has 50 layers, I'll group that. But I don't think you should group the eyes separately and the hands separately. People get crazy with those groups. Gotta calm down.
And there's- Sorry, just to go back to like rigging can't do everything. Rigging
Oh,
also can't fix bad animation.
Oh yeah.
If you're just bad at animation, like your posing is bad, rigging can't fix bad posing. We can't fix that. If you're not willing to redraw, rigging can't fix that. If you're not willing to, like, I don't know, add an extra layer if you need it, we can't fix that. We can't make all your decisions for you. We're not psychic.
And that's the other thing that why animation needs to know at least rudimentary rigging as well, because if you have a pose that you need to do where the default rig, I don't know, some part is masking another part, like say a lapel is being masked by the torso by default, but you have a scene where he's popping his collar up and suddenly your lapel needs to, pop up and no longer be masked by the torso. It's not rigging's responsibility, because that's one scene out of like an entire show where he doesn't have his lapel needing to be popped up, right? So as an animator, you should be able to go to that group and change the rig to work for your scene so that your scene works and your pose works. You can't expect the rigging department to go and like fix this one outlier, shot where something needs to be different.
That's the wonderful
So.
thing with working in 2D is that you can break the rigs because you can't do that in 3D, but in 2D you can do whatever you want and like it doesn't affect other people. And so if like you need something super specific in your scene, you can just do it. You can like go in and change your constraints and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you can rig
You
everything
need the legs
backwards
to
when you need to.
That's what I was just
Yeah.
saying.
But do
You need the legs to
know-
be rigged backwards.
If you break everything and you come with cookies to your rigger and say, Excuse me, Miss Rigger. I kind of broke everything. Can you come help me? I brought you cookies and coffee. They'll come help you. They're not monsters.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But if you go, this is all rigging's fault that I broke the rig, then rigging's gonna go, ha 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 ha.
Yeah.
They're just cackle
You
and
know-
turn around, just like.
Nope.
No. You didn't see me, but I did actually turn to walk away.
Yeah, you were doing this.
Yes.
No. That's
That
when I
is
think that scene planning is into my rigs when they shouldn't be. And
Oh,
then
that's
for
the
rigging,
other
it's just like,
thing.
I don't know what's going on, man.
The only people in the rigs are the riggers. Please, please, God, no one else go in the rigs because
Unless you're a
If
very
you-
trustworthy designer.
yeah, if you
Yeah.
want to like play with it and see how it works and everything, just save a local copy on your desktop.
Don't play
Because
with
if
the
you
mask.
change something,
Don't break the rigs, please.
I will kill you. I will cut you down, and not a court in the land will convict me because I will say, please, Your Honor, you don't understand. We just spent 4 months rigging, and they went in and they changed all the pivots, and they didn't tell
decided-
anybody, and it said 400 scenes. Your Honor, I had to kill him. And the honor will go, well, yes, here you go. Here's a Medal of Honor for having to put up with that. And you'll be like, I didn't even know that was a thing. And that's how that story will end.
And that's where she got that trophy case.
Oh. That explains everything. And also don't use apply peg pivot on parent drawing, because that breaks like everything. Drawing substitutions, deformers.
That sounds like
You know,
a
like you used to when you were using the pivot tool that's kind of outdated now.
the drawing pivot tool.
Yeah. Yeah, and then
The
you
good old
set your
days.
apply drawing pivot to parent peg. That breaks everything.
Yeah, nowadays you can't do that anymore.
Yeah, don't do
That's
that.
some old timey stuff.
Yeah, that's like Harmony 7 and before kind of old
That's
timey.
like, yeah, that's like Animate Pro 2. So.
Yeah, that's pretty much that. Yeah.
Before the harmonies, we used drawing pivots.
Before deformers were a thing.
Yeah, everything breaks now.
Because deformers came out with 9, right? Like 9.8 or whatever that was.
I just want a tool where you can set your peg pivots the same way you could set drawing pivots.
Yeah, having a copy paste for peg pivots would be great, especially with transformation limits.
Wait,
They don't have that.
Oh,
No,
she's got
they
that.
don't have that in 15. No, they don't.
You can't pivot, copy, pivot, paste yet. I've been asking since like it was 12. There's a thread. And I was like, please, please,
Every
Harmony.
place I've been, like that was the very first thing I asked our scripting wizard at Guru to write for me. He's like, how can I make your life easier? And I'm like, I need a copy paste pivot script. And he's like,
That you-
okay.
That
And
key
also magically duplicate
shortcuts,
drawings.
too.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that you can key shortcuts too, which I do not have at 9-story, but at least I have buttons.
You
on
didn't
my
take your
scripting
scripts
bar right now.
for you with you?
You can't though
didn't.
because this was installed like deeper, like so you actually
Yeah,
had
that was
a Guru
proprietary
menu.
stuff.
Gotcha. I thought it was
So,
just a
like-
script. Like, you could paste into the script
No.
editor.
No, he scripted it so we
No.
could set a hotkey to it, which was amazing.
Ah.
And then also so we could create our transformation limits, because you need to have your transformation limits need to have the exact same pivot point as whatever peg is beneath them,
Yeah.
otherwise they don't work.
Gotcha.
Or like you can get creative with how you put those pivots. Like if you move them somewhere else, that's fine, but just make sure that you're moving it on purpose and not accidentally. Because you can do some cool stuff with it, like getting like hanging necklaces, or like using it with the dynamic springs,
Yeah, I've just started.
which is what they're calling Velo for everybody who hasn't played with 15.
Oh, I
Is
was
that what
Yeah,
dynamic?
15.
Okay.
okay. It's
They do
Velo.
have Velo.
Yeah.
Yep.
Dynamic springs, that's what it's called?
Yep. And you use it with the 2-point constraint.
Which are the
Okay.
pointers.
And they work if you set them up the same way that we did at Guru,
Mm.
which, Angeline, I think you still have your notes on that, which I used to set them up. When we did the post-mortem on Ever After, I'm like, I'm going to have like 2,000 rigs to reference, and now I don't have access to that information anymore.
Yeah.
Meow.
I'm gonna have to see if I can find those notes.
Ever After was going to go on for 17 seasons. We were never going to be unemployed again.
Okay, well, before we all get into our sob stories,
Oh, I just wanted to say, like, overall, this is the main point about 2D animation. Like, I was in 3D for a very small period of time, but anyone that's in a 3D production, everything is very stratified. It's like, if you're an animator in Maya, that's what you are. You're an animator. A rigger is the same. You're in your own little sphere. You're doing rigging, and you don't do anything with animation. Animation can't re-rig, and modeling. They're all in very different stratified levels. But 2D is different. 2D is still, you need to really be able to do everything. It's different from 3D, even though we're still using a computer and we're still using software, and it has a lot of similarities to, you can use deformers and technology to help your animation. You're still responsible, even as an animator, to be also a designer and also a rigger. And as a rigger, you still have to keep in consideration design and animation. And if you want to be a designer in a 2D Harmony production, you still can't just be like, all I want to do is draw pretty pictures. You still have to think about a larger scope of what is my drawing going to be doing down the pipeline. And so 2D still is more like broad in, no matter what department you're doing, you should have at least a base understanding and at least small amount of skill in almost every other department that you're working with.
Love it.
To be able to be the best at your job.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that there ever was, or like no one ever was. Dun. It's also really important for everybody after storyboarding, basically, to watch the Leica in your show. Be familiar with what your designs need to do, be familiar with what your rigs need to do, figure out who the characters are. It's really important when you're discussing with someone that you can reference, like, at least the main characters, like, the major characters by name, and, like, that'll come with time. But if you've been on the show for a year and you still don't know the secondary characters who come on quite frequently, it can be pretty frustrating to try to, like, describe that.
It's the background character with bouncy hair and a really flouncy dress.
Yeah, and you're like, that's
most of them. That's most
all
of them.
of them.
Yeah,
That's all of them.
Don't just use terms like horse face or whatever comes to mind.
That's a later story.
We're just gonna leave that as it is. So, any parting words, Rachel?
Wait, are you getting rid of me now?
Well, you said an hour, so I don't want to keep you on.
And it's been 2. Yeah, no, that's fair. I gotta get back to you. Job number 3. I was gonna say something and I've forgotten now.
Sweet, cool.
Talk to people, be friends, work together.
Check your rigs.
Oh, that's right.
Yep,
When you're done with your rig, before you give it to your supervisor, go into the node view. Don't just do it in the camera view. Go into the node view and click on every single peg and check where those pivots are.
Start at top, work your way down, go into every group.
Oh, I like going actually from the bottom and working my way up.
You're fired.
Start with the hand,
That's fine
and the
too.
arm,
That's fine.
and then. But it's just, you can't just parent up, because sometimes there's pegs. Like, if you're having to do double pegs on something, you will have missed one, and then that pivot's like way over here, and then the animators have to change it every single time. Like, you change it once, and they have to change it in 50 scenes, and it just is really frustrating.
Parting words. Palettes are everybody's responsibility.
Oh, palettes.
Yes.
It's everybody's job to make sure the palettes are clean. Because Harmony has secret palettes. They need to be cleaned.
Yeah, palettes are sneaky.
I guess what I would say is, my best advice is, if you want to learn how to rigging can be overwhelming. Like, I know from just talking to people that have been wanting to do tests. I got into rigging in this kind of roundabout, easy way where it just kind of came
Happened.
And then suddenly, I wasn't. But if you really desire that you want to be a rigger, then just try to be logical. Like, when you're setting up a rig, it can be overwhelming. So take it part by part. Look at your design first and think to yourself, don't just go into it. Think to yourself, what do I want this character to do? That's the very first thing that you should be doing. Like, either your supervisor will be telling you this, like, this thing has to move like this, or you'll be looking at the Leica, like Angeline said, and you'll be seeing what the character does. But before you even touch it, you have to say to yourself, what is the purpose of this character? What do I have to get this character to do? And then just take it part by part, work on the torso first. Don't try to do everything at once. I've seen people that they go and they flit from place to place and they get really frustrated and just work. Rigs are just a lot of problems just put together that you just have to sort out and solve one by one. So, don't get frustrated, don't get overwhelmed. Just after you've decided this is what I need the character to do, then tackle every part of that character. Do the head first. Just focus on the head and work at all the problems that you need, like their face to do and the head to do, until you're happy with that, and check all your pivot points, and then move to the next thing. Then do the torso. What do you need the torso to do? What is inside there that needs to move or not move, or be separated or not separated? And just do it part by part so that you don't get overwhelmed, and that you can just focus on a certain thing and problem solve small, and then soon you'll have the whole rig done, and you'll not feel like it was this huge mountainous problem that you're facing if you just take it small. And over time you'll get faster, and then you'll not have to do that as much. But that's what I would say for a beginner rigger. The other thing I would say, and maybe this is also because just initially I was an animator, is what I said before is, the most important thing about a rig is how it's going to animate. And you always have to think to yourself, if I was animating this rig, would I like the thing that I just did? So after you rig a part, you have to think to yourself, would I do, if I was actually now animating a scene and I was using this, would I find this really useful, or would I be like, oh my goodness, like, why is this so annoying? And if it's the latter, well, then you have to think of another solution, because rigging doesn't have one solution. You can solve a problem, a rigging problem, in many different ways, but there's always better solutions than others depending on your production or what you want the character to do. And it's up to you as a rigger to decide which one is that best solution. And part of the way of getting there is to always keep animation in mind, is to always think, if I was now using this rig in a practical sense, animating a scene, would I like what I just did, what I just rigged? And if it's yes, then you can be confident. And if an animator comes, this always will allow you to, if an animator comes later and goes, why did you rig it like that? Then you can proudly and confidently say, well, if I was animating this scene, that's how I would like to do it, rather than like, I don't know, I just
seemed like a good idea.
That's the worst. That's the worst, because then animators think you put no thought into how you were rigging it. So that's, for a beginner animator, I would say that those two are the best advice I could give you.
Brilliant.
Oh,
Printed.
also, just to tack on really quickly, when you're taking things piece by piece, you also then have to test everything together, because sometimes they interact.
Yes. Oh, that's the best thing. After you rig something, the best thing to do is to pose it out. Just pose it into, not just move it, like pose it into like a shrugging pose on one foot, or do something, arms above the head. Do some pose to see if your rig breaks, because sometimes I'll see riggers, they'll rig it up and then all they do is kind of rotate the arm maybe like 20 degrees and they're like, perfect. Actually take that rig and pose it into some weird pose and see what breaks, because that's QCing, and that's actually a really important part of rigging that I think a lot of departments or productions actually fail to do. They don't QC their rigs, and it's not even rigging's fault. Sometimes the schedule doesn't even allow it, and it's such a crucial stage, because what breaks when you try it out.
Yeah, once you get down to the sea-level extras, things start to slide.
That's why you have a good template, so you don't have to think about it as much after.
Oh, for sure. Well, thanks for dropping by, everyone. This has been very informative.
Hey.
I hope so.
I've learned many things. I think the baby riggers have lots of good info to go out into the world and become
Oh.
grown-up riggers.
One thing to add, and it's something that Simon said when you did a interview with him, but like if someone tells you how they want something rigged, don't decide that you know better than your supervisor, please.
Yeah, I think
Your supervisor has told you to rig something in a very specific way for a very specific reason. Because if you do it in any other way, it's wrong.
Well, I think if you have a solid idea, you can pitch it to your supervisor and say, hey, I have this idea. I think this will help. Let me know your thoughts. If they say no, the answer is no.
Yeah.
But it's always worth bringing ideas because more ideas are always good. But it better be an idea and not just your like flittery thoughts about not wanting to use a template.
I didn't like how your template was organized. So I organized it so that all the things were organized in plug-in order instead of by piece.
I pressed the auto sort. Now
And
it's
the
a
auto
fan.
order up button.
It looks like a peacock.
I
It's beautiful.
The group.
It's beautiful.
I drew a man with my pegs.
That's what my rig looks like.
I know.
All right.
That's okay. That's your style. It's Tracy's style.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for inviting us, Tracy.
Yeah, if you guys have any
Yeah.
social
It's
media
cool to talk to
that
you.
you pimp, feel like let me know and I'll put it all in the description down below. I don't think any of you are trying to become YouTube stars.
No.
No.
No,
I
we're
will
here.
eventually
pretty-
have videos for my classes, but I don't know if I'm allowed to make those public. So.
Well, if you do, by all
Please
means
for
let us
you,
know
Tracy.
and I will hype your channel for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're here to help you.
Yeah, become an internet
know.
star.
Thanks you
You
guys.
can make dozens
Yes.
of dollars.
Yes.
Bye.
I can afford that imported
And
beer.
Dozens of dollars even.
The imported peanut butter. What? Dijon ketchup?
Yes. But I'll just get regular ketchup.
Just eat more. It's fine.
All right, so here's that awkward midpoint transition I was talking about. The audio starts off, and Ray is talking about her current job position. She is now the overhead super duper supervisor of an entire studio's worth of rigging department. So all of the different shows, she kind of oversees them at the same time. So that's where it starts off, just so you're not in a disembodied conversation.
A number of meetings with some of the old dogs who worked in Flash a lot about whether or not we wanted to put this one upcoming show into using the pencil tool. Took me about 4 hours to convince them that that was an okay idea.
Please never use the brush.
I love this.
Actually, Harmony
Well, FX can use
brush
it.
good.
Oh,
because-
sorry?
Harmony 15, they were talking about it in the webinar yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
About how instead of just having the brush and never being able to edit both sides at the same time, there's a new function where you can edit the brush kind of like the pencil tool. You use a
That's
completely
exciting.
different tool to do that. We were wondering why they didn't actually consolidate the two tools, because that would be super useful.
Because more is more. So more tools means you get more things.
Yeah. They get to say they've added a whole new tool.
Well, it's a new functionality to an old tool. Like, it's to do with the texture brushes.
Yeah, I haven't gotten into any
Yeah.
of the texture stuff yet.
I'm
Yeah, it
always
works
worried
a lot
about it.
better.
I've only
Okay.
had a chance to get into some of the constraints and springs, some of the like basic new elements. I just haven't had a lot of time yet.
Yeah. Did you get the springs working with the what are they called now? They're not orphans anymore. They're transformation limits.
Yeah,
Transformation limits, yes.
Yeah, transformation limits.
yeah. I love that sometimes things are named the same thing and do different things, or they're named something
Yeah.
that doesn't make any sense. It's my
Yeah,
favorite
I'm
part
really
of
bothered
the.
that the cutters are flipped, like the hidden
Yeah.
cutters are now flipped. That bugs me.
I when I heard that, I was like, oh, why? Why
Yeah,
would you
that's.
do that?
I was super confused. I'm
Why?
like, wait, how did I do this? But the cool thing about about the new cutters though is if you double click the little mask, it'll just invert it. You don't actually have to open the box.
And
That's
then you
nice.
also don't have to rename your cutters to indicate that they're inverted because it's a different color set.
Mhm.
Well, it's like an inverted color set, but it's still good.
I just like that they're tiny ninjas.
Yeah. I thought that was the cutest new
They're
thing.
masks. They're ninja masks. It's good. One of the other really cool things that they were talking about yesterday was the guides. Did you see those? The perspective guides that you can enable in the
Oh.
drawing tools?
Yeah, I haven't
Yeah,
opened
I
it
was
yet.
worried about that.
which looks amazing for people who struggle with perspective like me.
Yeah.
Layouts are hard. They make me sad.
Yeah, I was thinking
I'm bad.
I would have to do the perspective guides and then transfer them over into Photoshop. But they have new guides too now. Everybody has guides. We're from the future. Remember when we had to do it with a ruler?
And then fail horribly and disappoint our teachers.
I definitely taped paper so I could have a vanishing point a foot off in either direction.
Excuse me, guys. Just putting my vanishing point over here by you.
Yeah, and then you have to hold it out and then get your ruler. Yeah, I did that.
Don't move your paper. It's right here.
It's right over halfway across the room.
Yep.
On the cat. Shit, the cat moved.
Has anyone used any of the other programs that are floating around, like Moho or OpenTunes? There's a few free ones that are floating around nowadays.
No, I haven't yet.
Our tech person, one of our tech people is currently playing with Moho. He seems to like it.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about Studio Paint and Moho. It's just I never have time to grab new things, and what I'm using's working, so I'm not going to crack out something new. And
yeah, well, it's also kind of becoming more industry standard, which is nice.
Harmony
people
is.
Know it.
Yeah.
Yes, Harmony is.
Yeah.
Suddenly Moho, and everyone's like, oh no.
When we were hiring new people coming out of Max the Mutts, they all knew Harmony and none of them knew Flash. And season 1 of our show was in Flash, and we had to
oh no.
I had to teach them Flash, and it was just mind-blowing because I've been using Flash for so long. Everybody learned it either by themselves or in school, and then suddenly everybody knew Harmony and no one knew Flash.
Well, when I first started getting into animation, when computers were cheap enough to have one in your home, that was the only thing that you could really get a copy of was Flash.
Yeah.
So it was super standard for a long time. All the indie stuff was done in Flash, but now a lot of the guys like Adam Phillips, they're all converting over to Harmony nowadays. So even the Newgrounds guys are using Harmony, which doesn't make any sense in my head.
Can you believe? Holy cow. But it's such a better program. I could see why. If you can, get the price tag and or the subscription or something, I would definitely want to switch over because they have deformers and you can sync drawings and you don't have to go into symbols.
Well, just the network view or the node view.
Oh my god.
Network view and modules tells you how long we've been working with the program.
Yeah, they've just renamed everything for funsies.
Well,
I worked on a Flash effects jobby a few months ago, and they said that they just wanted to recolor everything that I'd done, and I was just like,
oh no.
But
I hope you put your black to 0.0001. You know that trick we used to do on Ugly?
Yeah.
So that you could recolor your lines.
The black fills. Oh.
Yeah.
You could protect colors. I've been recoloring so many things and
that's so much.
protecting colors. And
yeah.
It's beautiful. I just want a keyboard shortcut so I can protect and unprotect things, and I don't have to select it all and then right click and go, there it is.
Yeah, that
every
makes
time.
Sense.
Yeah. I want a keyboard shortcut. They actually, in 14 anyways, you can't make it a keyboard shortcut, but being able to copy your color and then have a keyboard shortcut to paste the actual color value, not the numerical pot, but the color value.
Oh, that would be really nice.
It's in there. That's one of the options.
It's an option. You can paste it, but you can't set a hotkey to it.
Oh, okay, that's what you mean.
And there's actually no coding for it because we were trying to do that.
Just make a list of things we need hotkeys for and be like, hey,
I have a list of things I need hotkeys for. It's like an internal doc where everybody has all their complaints. And
please
then we
put the protect colors one on there too, because I am also compiling a list of things that bother me. A lot of them are in the exposure sheet, actually.
The exposure sheet is so chuggy, though.
Well, what I'm doing is when we're importing in these files, like these SWIFTs we've exported out, Harmony has a thing that's supposed to work, and we've never been I haven't been able to get it to work. So there's a way that you can kind of sneakily get a SWIFT into Harmony, and if you do that, it will have all your exposures out like 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, but then it looks like everything's on ones instead of having things nicely exposed. Like for the like 1 is for 2 frames and 2 is for 2 frames. So I've been going into the X sheet and I can see when things flip from like being on 2s to being on 1s to being on 2s, and I'm not like deleting frames I want. But there are a lot of problems in the X sheets, so.
The only thing I use it for is like sequence fill and rename by frame. I think that's the only thing I use it for.
Well, the desk is pretty useful too, but most of the functionality of the desk is replaced by the new color tools in 15.
No, I think the desk will still be pretty useful for people doing hand animation. I know a few people doing that, and they sent a lot of drawings to desk. They were some old school animators, and they found that very helpful.
That's something I haven't used very much at all, is the desk. I think I only found out about it like a year ago.
Well, we never used it.
When did we ever use this? Yeah.
Because any problems we had, like we were also working in like 10, our special build of 10. So like most of us didn't use that because we had the older version of Harmony, and then we had a special wizard who wrote us things when we needed them.
Yeah, working at a big studio that has custom tools is a nice place to be.
Yeah,
it's a dream.
We actually have a really good guy at Yowza who
we
has a really good script, because one of the other things at least 14 didn't have is for deformers, you could show your normal deformer, but if you had a deformer node, like a scale deformer mod, like in the deformer, you'd have to go into the actual deformer, select the scale node, like node, and then click it on, which was really annoying. And then lots of people wouldn't even know because animators don't bother, especially
they don't read those
rigs.
tooltips.
Well,
no,
and
they don't look at the inside a deformer. They're not going to go inside a deformer.
Yeah,
a lot of animators are scared of them.
Yeah, lots of animators are scared of the network, like if they're not really used to it, so they're not going to see all the kind of stuff that's in there, maybe, especially things like scale deformers, which I like. So
I love
we got
scale
someone
deformers.
got someone to. Anyway, quickly, we got someone to actually script an awesome script that allows you to, at a click of a button, show basically everything that is on a deformer, like including any mods or other things, which is great.
That's great.
Oh, and then he also wrote one because it's really hard to reset a scale deformer.
Yes.
You can't just reset it.
You can't. Yeah, that's the other. That's bizarre. Like you can't. You can reset normal deformers, but you can't reset scale deformers. Like I use them all the time on a show at Guru, and I'd have to keep basically a key of the default values of the scale deformer just somewhere on my timeline, so that if I had to default it back, I couldn't just click a button. I had to go to that defaulted keyframe and like paste it in there, which is like, why even have this ability if you can't reset it back to default? But now we have a script for it, which is great.
Yeah, they run into a lot of problems with that in Harmony, where like the specific example of script scale deformers, where you can't reset that, but you like they also have that with like quad maps and everything along that same line, and then also the new animated mats. You can't reset those either, and in the version I was playing with anyway, you can't actually set a key to lock in your default values for it.
What?
So you select it, you have it collapsed, you set a key, then you go to move, like you set a key on like frame 1, you set a key on frame 5, you use like frame 1 as your default, but then you move frame 5, and frame 5 doesn't recognize that you had a key on frame 1, so it ignores the key that you set on frame 1. In the version that I was working with, which was the pre-release. So
which was the 15? Version 15?
Yeah, a 15. Because that's the one that has animated mats.
Yeah, I was wondering what the advantage of animated mats is versus just using gradients.
Animated mats to me look like one of the modules that our wizard at Guru had written for us that we use really heavily on Ever After High, were the one that we were using for textures. So it looks, when you hit Shift F11, it looks almost exactly like that kind of a display, except for you can't attach pegs to it, which would make it way more useful.
Yeah, like wouldn't
So
it be
it's doing
easier to
kind
use
of
a multi-point constraint?
The multi-point constraint still keeps things flat. So if you want to have something like it kind of replaces morphing a little bit because it still displays the drawing. Like you can toss that onto a hand that you've broken up properly, and if you just have that hand on one group, you can use the points that you get from the animated mat to sort of like change the way that you would animate that hand. Like you can kind of like redraw it. Like it lets you edit the contour points as though you were in the drawing, but then you don't have to redraw it and change the drawing substitution.
I'll definitely have to give it more time then, because I was kind of looking at it, and I'm coming from an effects standpoint, and their video they were doing like lighting on a box, and I was like, well, wouldn't it be easier to just light the box, or even just create a box and then put just gradients on it without any masks or anything, just have a painted box that's lit? But that animated thingy sounds cool.
It is one of the modules that they got from Guru, I think. They tried to simplify it, but in doing so, they took away almost all of its functionality. Like the visibility switch. They took out half of the functionality of that, ignoring that it can be an extremely powerful tool if you're able to attach that visibility switch to the constraint switches that they added into 15.
Like instead of using the active thing?
No, so the way that we were using the visibility, like the module that the visibility switch is based off of, it had 2 ports. So it had one that you would add the constraint switch to, and then it had the one that you would have whatever you were turning on and off. So you could attach a switch to multiple ports, like multiple things that you wanted to turn on and off. Like if you wanted to change the plugin order without using Z dragging, you could do that, but they didn't change the visibility switch to reflect the original functionality of the switch that they were copying, so that functionality is gone.
Basically, the visibility switch had a gate system that you could assign, say, a number to.
Right.
So say you had 2 visibility switches, you could assign one maybe like 0 and the other 1, and then you could attach it to, say, 2 different kinds of hands or whatever, heads, yeah. So you could attach one to like a 3/4 head and one to a side head,
right?
And so then you could attach your what do they call it, constraint switch or whatever they call it in this
I
one?
don't remember what
something like that.
it is.
Whatever.
It's the light bluey green switch.
Yeah, so it's basically you could attach your switch then to the second port out of your visibility switch, and then you could control which gate you had.
Like you could animate
active.
it.
Yeah.
So you could animate it.
What
so
I've been doing
you
for
could
that.
use your switch. You could use your switch to say, I want to see my 3/4 head, which I have assigned to 0. And so when you animate and set the switch to 0, then the profile head would turn off because you've got the visibility switch, and so you wouldn't see it in the render.
Right. What I do
also
for that
couldn't select it.
Yeah, what I do
Yeah,
for
and
that
you
is I
couldn't
use an
select it or
image
anything.
switch.
Image
and then,
switch is fine.
Yeah,
I know, but this was
Everything, though,
simpler.
that's the
Like this
problem.
is a simplified. This is a very
Yeah.
simplified, easy thing to do that they've now taken out and now made things more complicated because now you have to use like these image switches and all this other stuff.
Image switches
I
don't have the
that's
same
the point.
functionality.
Yeah.
Well, what I do is I hook the image switch up to like a little GUI I create myself, and then I just connect it to like the XY value, whatever one I have it switched to, so that the animator can animate the little controller, and then the X value will tell the thing like once you hit 1, you go to gate 1. Once you hit 2, you go to gate 2. But I got to make it all myself with expressions.
I had actually emailed Harmony because I was trying to see if there was something in the program now, because like I was coming from 10 and maybe they'd added something in 14, and I found the image switches and I was like, can I use this in this way? Can I use it like to swap heads or whatever? And then they told me that the image switch was meant mostly for images and it would be unstable if I used it for more things. So
I use it to have 3 different outfits on a character so that they could just swap between.
yeah, okay, well,
Yeah.
it's good to know that they were being very cautious in what they were telling me and that you could use it
No,
if
I've
you
done
had
that. And it was great because
like-
a lot of the animators used the wrong costume for a segment.
to.
And we were able to just go in, flip the switch, and it worked.
Did you
Done.
run into problems where they could actually select the stuff that wasn't visible? Because that's what I was finding was like, if it was these great big wings and then you turn them off, they were still there and you could still grab them.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, that's another problem with the image switch, plus the fact that it has like the bitmap composite in it. So if you just used it to change your rotational view of, say, an entire character, you can't pull that character in Z anymore.
Well, the way I did it is I put in multiple image switches inside the thing, and then all the image switches were connected to one controller using expressions. So it didn't affect the Z as bad. It wasn't just one big thing. So you could put in a lot of them. It's pretty heavy, though. But I mean, the character has 3 costumes on, so it's heavy anyway. It's a terrible plan.
Envelope deformers, because lol.
Yeah, all the things.
Envelope deformers on everything.
Also, don't do that, kids. Envelope deformers.
Why
are
do
really
they like
cool.
envelope deformers so much?
Like, they're neat, but they're very hard for redraw, and it takes a super long time to pose.
Nobody redraws; they just use the deformer.
Yeah, and then you bake the deformer if you need to get like an overlap on something. It's fine.
No,
it's not a big deal.
Like, there are places where envelope deformers are great, but then there are also places where just make it simple and just redraw.
The latest rigs I did, I put in just a single deformer up the torso, so you could just, and they took them all out, and they put in envelope deformers on all the torsos.
Oh, that's the worst.
I'm like, cool story, bro.
We were working on when we were working on Ever After High, we put what is sort of an envelope deformer on like the bottom halves of legs of these characters. I don't think I talked to one person who used them. They were so heavy and they were hard to use. And
See, what you gotta do is you put shadow and light module, like, so you have like the lit part and then the shadow part, so that you can move it on every individual part. So this part has its own shadow, and then this part has its own shadow. Then you run all those through envelope deformers.
Oh, is that how you're working around, like, doing light and shadow compositing in Harmony?
Just use an apply
I'm trying to
peg.
convince them to do render passes.
Tracy, I'm gonna cry.
It hurts my
It's
heart.
the saddest thing I've ever heard.
I'm in effects. I don't know what happens over there.
Well, when we were on those characters that we were doing on Ever After, you're talking about the dragons, right?
I'm talking about the dragons, yeah.
Yeah,
The
with
like
the-
lower limbs.
Yeah, it was. They were going off models so fast, so Mel like ran around and slapped me for putting them in. She's like, "Stop putting those in. My animators are just making really ugly drawings with them. Please stop."
That's the thing about like rigging, right? It's sometimes you think, oh, this will be good, but it actually takes longer, or you'll go off like envelope deformers.
Yeah.
I think lots of people go, hey, you don't have to draw, you can just change this line, you can deform this line into the shape that you want. But you don't realize that it actually sometimes takes longer to deform things into shape to get that pose than it is just to redraw it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very easy to go off model when people are doing that, because people stop to care when it takes like 20 minutes, maybe even a day to do one pose, because everything's an envelope deformer.
Yeah.
It's a nightmare.
Yup.
Yeah, the number one complaint I got when I was a rigger was that things were too heavy. And my number 2 complaint was that they wanted more bells and whistles. So they'd be like, we want lighting, we want envelope deformers, we want everything. Also,
Can you just add more cutters on everything?
Yeah, like more cutters, and
that's
then
not going to be heavy at all.
texture, and we want it to be lighter also.
Yes. Did you try, Tracy?
To
Did you
redraw.
try using glue? I feel that.
Yeah.
No, the fairies module. Fairies module.
Bees.
The Lemmings one.
Bees.
I had a great scene once where we had just dragged all of that in. It was amazing.
Good.
There's fairies, there were lemmings, there were bees, there was glue.
I
It was
really-
all glued together.
I think those are some of the best features that Harmony has, is just the examples.
Like, some of them are good, but some of them are like just
I
redundant.
actually use a lot of them. If I have to create a particle effect, I'll look through the catalog and see what's the closest and start with that. If it's bees, it's
That's what I
bees.
Yeah, that actually makes sense.
So and everything's pre-named, like the folders and stuff. And if you open it up, it has some of the menus just in the initial folder. You can turn things on and off there if you use the pre-made ones. And it all says bees and stuff in there. It just makes my day. So someone's like, how do I do this with your thing? And I'm like, oh, just go into the bees sprite module. Just search for bees and you'll find it. It's fine.
Good.
All right, so thanks for watching all the way to the end. Good stamina. I don't think I have any announcements right now, but there should be some soon. Like, share, subscribe, all those things internet people ask you to do, and I will see you in the next video.